Hello and welcome to a new Mendix Expert Developer Webinar. My name is Jan de Vries and I will be your host for today. Today's webinar will be about the automated testing of your Mendix app using the application test suite developed together with Mansystems, and will be presented by Eduard de Bruin, Sales Engineer, and Clyde Waal, Expert Services Consultant at Mendix. Georg Holtz from Mansystems is available to answer any technical questions. During the webinar, you can submit your questions in the question window in GoToWebinar. After the presentation, we will go through them one by one. The questions and answers will be added to the webinar page afterwards. Before we start, please look at the handouts window in GoToWebinar to find the presentation slides. Thank you for joining and enjoy the presentation. I'll now give the floor to Eduard.
Thank you, Jan, for all the introductions, and thank you all for attending this webinar. So, during this webinar, what we will do from an agenda perspective is we will start with a quick introduction to the application test suite. After the introduction, we will give you a live demonstration of some of the key capabilities of the ATS platform. After that, I will hand over to Clyde, who will share how best to adopt ATS within your organization, and we will finalize this presentation with sharing you some the roadmap of the ATS, and after that we will open up the floor for Q&A. So let's start to kick off with the introduction of to ATS. And to first a little bit set the scene, and probably if you have seen a presentation from Mendix recently, this should be a familiar site, which is the bimodal IT solution, in this case from Gartner, where you have a clear split between a mode 1 and a mode 2 organization, where we typically say that Mendix really fits as well within the best way within a mode 2 type of organization, where you would have small cross-functional teams working very closely together, so every business and IT work very closely together, delivering applications in very rapid iterations, and of course leveraging the Mendix platform to deliver those applications. Now, how does testing fit within that, the dynamics of a mode 2 type of organization, where you would have those very quick iterations, where you would have, in this case, very quick IT collaboration as well, and then how can you effectively make testing part of that very dynamic way of delivering your applications? And how can you make it very much a critical success? Because of course, testing, delivering applications fast, you also need to be able that you can also test in a very fast way, and really to make sure that you can make the quality, in this case testing, your development process, really as well minimize your regressions. So sometimes what we see that our clients have or dedicated testers that sometimes work in a manual way, or leverage some testing tools that need to be adopted to make sure that they can work together with Mendix. But in some cases, our clients, they don't have any dedicated test resources, and then really the test load or testing becomes a responsibility for the developers themselves, or maybe for the people on the business side to be able to deliver as well valuable tests in the end, to make sure that your quality is being delivered in the right way in the end into production. So being able to embed testing in very much in the dynamics of a mode 2 organization, it really is critical that you have a simple and an easy to use tool, so that potentially the business users or your developers themselves are able to use it, and to also to minimize the amount of work that they need to do to make sure that it also is in a very highly automated fashion. And in this case as well mentioned, fitted for really small cross-functional teams to really be able to do it yourself to build up those test scripts. Now, it is from that mindset and that perspective that we have developed together with our partner Mansystems this suite, which in this case is a cloud service offered by Mendix, in this case as mentioned in partnership together with Mansystems, to really help you with automate the functional testing process of your Mendix applications. So how is it built? We leverage, in this case, Selenium which is an open source test framework that supports you with and where you can create your tests, automated test script, and we will get to that in more detail. But we were leveraging Selenium, but what we have done is build the ATS application on top of Selenium to make sure that you can really leverage it so you get an out-of-the-box full integration with the Mendix platform. So at one point with your Mendix applications, but on the other hand, you're also able to add your test scripts to user stories that are already defined in Mendix. And I will get to that in more detail during the demonstrations. But it allows you to run cross-browser functional testing based, in this case, on keywords. What our keywords mean, we will also address in a little bit later. But it also supports scheduling for parallel testing, and as mentioned, seamlessly compatible with your Mendix platform version. Now, how does it help, or what are then the key benefits? Of course, you will be able to reduce your cost and effort of testing because you can automate a lot of, if you are doing already manual testing, you can automate that process and reduce a lot of effort that needs to be put into it. But maybe even next to that, also very much increase the quality of the applications that you deliver, which could also have the effect that you would have less incidents or critical one tickets after you go live with your applications as it is being delivered there. And of course, if you can automate that and you reduce your cost and you reduce the effort, it can also contribute to your shorter time to market and your first time right delivery of your applications. So this is just a quick introduction on the ATS, why it's been built, what it is, and what it can actually do for you. But ATS, the best way to talk about it or to show it is more or less to show this demonstration of the tool, so you get a much better feeling of what it can do. So during my demonstration of the ATS, I need an application that I need to test, and the application that you're looking at right now is the application that we will use for demonstrating the test capabilities, which is the Mendix Expenses application, which is an application that we use to showcase the capabilities of the Mendix platform. And what it does is an application where you can create an expense or an expense report, submit that to your manager, and then your manager can approve or reject it, and then it gets and then it can be handled by finance, and where in the end your expense can be paid. So this is just the dashboard that you will see of an employee that logs in, and you will see here different expense reports already on the homepage. I'll get back to this application in a minute. But first, what I wanted to highlight is that we just finalized a sprint for development. In this case, it was the September sprint. So we have finalized the development of the sprint of the application, and here you would see the list of all the different user stories that we have finished development. We are leveraging the Mendix portal and to manage as well our sprints and also our backlog and our user stories. And one of them I would really like to highlight, and as you can see here, as a user I would like to create and submit an expense for approval. Now, let me go into ATS. So this is what you're looking at is the dashboard of the home screen of the ATS application. And here I have an overview of the different applications that are enabled to be tested using the ATS application. And also have my Mendix Expenses application enabled within ATS. So let me just dive into the project. So going into the project, each project or each application has a dashboard itself as well. You will see an overview of the recent test cases that have been executed, some graphs on the results per day, but most importantly, you will also here have a list of the different user stories, and the sprints that were defined in the Mendix portal are automatically synced and available within the ATS application. So I have here my September sprint, and what I can do is I can navigate to and find that specific user story that I would like to create a test script for. And as you can see here on the top, here I have the user story that as a user I would like to create and submit an expense for approval. So let's start to add a test case to this user story. I can choose to add a test. Let's say that we want to call this one submit expense, or sorry, create an expense report. I can base this on a template, and the template is the foundation of your test script, where you would have certain actions that will always be repetitive across all different types of test scripts. And in this case, logging in and logging out are actions that would need to occur almost in every kind of test script. So we use the login and log out as a template, and I can choose to create and open. So what I'm looking at right now is the definition of my test script, which now consists of 5 different steps, where the first 2 steps represent logging that will log me in as a certain employee, and the step 3 to 5 will in the end log me out of the application. Now, what I would like to do is, after logging in as an employee, I would like to create a new expense report. And I can actually then select step number 2, and I can choose to add all of those steps manually, but ATS also has the recording function, which means that I can click on this link or on this button here, and now ATS goes into recording mode. And recording mode means that it will now listen to all of the actions that I will take within the context of my application that I will be browsing. So let's go to my application, and let's start to navigate through the test script that I would like to create. So let's say that I first want to create a new report. So this is my webinar report. A new expense report is now being created, and I want to add 1 expense to this report. And in this case, let's say that I want to create an expense for that I stayed in a hotel. So I stayed actually in a hotel in Rotterdam. The expense type was that it was an accommodation. The currency in this case was euros, and the amount was 130 euros. I can choose to save it. My expense was saved successfully, and not to pollute the data or the database with too much test data. After this, I want to delete the expense report as well. If I now go back into my ATS application, you will see that all of the steps that I took while browsing through my application were now recorded by the ATS application. And so all of the steps here, from clicking to create a new report up until deleting the report there as well in the end. Now what I can do is I can choose to save my recordings, and when I'll now save my recordings, you will see that all of those steps were automatically injected exactly at the position where I wanted them to be placed in, so directly after logging in as a test employee. And so this script will now log me in as an employee, create as well the whole report, and in the end it will also delete the report for me and then log myself out. So my test script, as I've recorded it right now, is done. So what I can choose to do right now, I can choose to run it. And while I'll click finalize in the run, you will see that the test is now being pended as well within, it is added to the queue. There are no other test scripts that I want to execute right now in the queue, so you will see that it's currently running. It will take just a couple of seconds, I think 20-30 seconds more or less, to execute it. But what is happening on the background is that the script that we have recorded and recorded using ATS within our application is now handed over to our Selenium instance that will now automatically execute exactly that script the way how we recorded it. It will go through all of those steps, and if something went wrong and potentially maybe you had another deployment in the meanwhile, it will then see if the script or the application or the functionality that you were testing would still work, and otherwise it will directly give you also the feedback that it's still working. So all of those test scripts that you have created, you can then bundle them and then use those as well to support as well all of your regressions. Now, as you can see, that this script that we have just created is just finished just moments ago. The green check mark means that it was executed successfully. So let's just have a look what happened there on the background. I can actually show you as well that it executed all of these steps successfully, but the best way seeing is believing. So let's just jump into our Selenium instance that we also where it was executed. So what I have open here is the Selenium instance that we are running in now for our demo. In this case, we have chosen to leverage BrowserStack, which is an online Selenium provider that provides you Selenium as a service. So we have leveraged that in this case for the demo. And what you can see is we have here a script where it was started just 1 minute ago, and it's also was finalized. And what we can do is we can replay our test scripts, how they were also executed. So I can choose to play it. And let me just maximize the screen. And what you will see is that exactly that test script as I recorded it, it should be here my webinar report, is now also being executed automatically by the Selenium system. It really leverages all of the values that I have here as well. And as you can see here, this is also just giving you the proof how the recording that we just created is also being executed automatically. Here as well, we're leveraging in this case Selenium. So this is just an introduction and to showcase some of the core capabilities of in this case of ATS. I really wanted to showcase you how easy it is to create your test scripts and how easy it is to create your test scripts. And then as well to also to use them to record, to use them or to replay them to test if your functionality is still working. And especially after, for instance, you things that you have developed in sprint 1, that after sprint 4 or 5 you can very much leveraging as well this in the scheduling functionality of Selenium to see if all of those things that you have created then once in the first sprint are still working and are functionally there. As well available. So this was just an introduction demonstration from my part. I'm now going to hand over to Clyde to explain to you how you will be able to adopt ATS within your organization.
Thank you, Eduard. Yes, I'm going to talk about some of the things we've learned and also our partner Mansystems has learned while implementing the automated application test suite at customers. And this part of the webinar is divided in 2 parts. The first part is about governance. So we found that having the appropriate governance in place really greatly increases the value of agile testing. And this part is mostly targeted at product owners and IT management. And the second part will be about team best practices. And in this I will explain how we recommend you to get started and organize your team around agile testing. So as Eduard already explained, at Mendix we often use Gartner's bimodal IT model to explain the difference in governance you need between different kinds of application development projects in your organization. We have the mode 1 applications, think your CRM system, your finance system. They are usually developed in a more traditional way with the traditional processes. And you have the mode 2 applications, which are your innovation applications, applications that you use to differentiate yourself from your competitors. And these are the types of applications that are usually developed using Mendix. And it is important to tailor your governance not only for your development phase but also for your testing phase, and actually especially for your testing phase towards whether you're developing a mode 1 or a mode 2 application. And when you're doing a mode 2 application, it's important to maintain your speed and agility. So if we look at if we look at the spectrum between a mode 1 and a more traditional application, in a mode 1 application you have an emphasis on safety and accuracy, and that's usually safeguarded by a formal testing process. So many organizations use something like the V model and have like strict responsibilities between the different phases and handover moments. And developers and testers are usually not in the same team. So to have testing success in a traditional Mode 1 context, you really focus on a well-implemented process. Now if we move towards the right of the spectrum, towards the Mode 2 innovation applications, then there's an emphasis on agility and speed. You want to make your time to market. So what we have found at customers is that quality in that context, in a Mode 2 context, is safeguarded by having an active product owner. It really is the thing that is a difference between a successful or a failure in your project. It's true for development, but it's especially true for testing, and I will explain why. So in a Mode 2 context, you usually have your development and testing done simultaneously, and the developers and testers are usually in the same team, often using Scrum as a development methodology. And what we have found, as I said, is that a key success factor in that context is to have effective day-to-day product ownership by a proactive product owner. And what I'd like to note at this point also is that ATS technically, of course, supports both modes. My point here is that you need the appropriate governance for your situation to achieve the full benefits of agile testing. So when you're in a Mode 2 mode, you need to have effective agile product ownership. What does that mean? Well, what we have found at customers is that two things are really important. And that is that you have a product owner that takes active responsibility for testing based on business goals. So that means that this product owner is in a close dialogue with the business and that the business stakeholder he or she is talking to really has a stake in app quality. If the business is not involved or represented, then there's nobody that will feel the pain of low software quality. And what we've seen in practice is that often leads to testing being the lowest priority. Also, what we have found is that successful product owners use agile practices for defining requirements and specifications. And with agile, I mean practices that comply with agile principles. So they are based on a team effort, they actively involve the business, they are simple, lightweight, and that means they're usually visual. So to give you an example of this, two practices that we recommend to use for requirements and specification are impact mapping and specification by example. And impact mapping, an impact map is actually a map showing you how your project is going to contribute to business goals. And by making the impact map, you make the business impact that you seek explicit. So that means that you can focus your development and testing on achieving that impact. So to zoom in on that a little bit, if this is an example of an impact map, and in this case we have a project that has the business goal of aiming to lower the field maintenance costs. So when you do an impact mapping workshop, which is usually something that you do at the beginning of the project, and that's initiated by the product owner with direct involvement of the business, so the actual business stakeholders that need something, that need to achieve something in the organization. You start a workshop by figuring out which kind of behavioral change you want, so which kind of impact you want from a specific actor to achieve the business goal. So in this case, we want the actor service engineers to drive more efficiently as a way to achieve lower field maintenance costs. So by doing this together with the business, you make sure that everybody is aligned on what the target is, what the goal is we all want to achieve. And then you start to look at your epic. So this is the software deliverable, the thing that you want to build in your project to support the behavioral change that you seek. So in this case, in this example, we want to have optimized routes based on appointments so that our service engineers can drive more efficiently, and that will lead to lower field maintenance costs. Now, these epics at a later stage in your project, of course, they lead to they will be broken up into user stories, and that will go into your sprints. Finally, we have a metric, and you define a metric to measure the degree of behavioral change that you are achieving in your project. So this makes it very clear for all stakeholders whether you're successful or not in achieving the behavioral change that you seek. So this is an impact map, an example of an impact map, and it shows you it immediately, if you do it correctly, it shows you immediately where are the high impact and high risk areas of your application. So it shows you where to focus your development and your testing, and it also shows you where you can where you should do specifications. So specifications, because you want to do specifications at the point in your application where you have the highest risk or you want to achieve the highest impact. For this we recommend using specification by example. And specification by example is a way of specifying user stories. So for example, if we have the user story, as a field service engineer, I want to view my scheduled service locations on a map, then we can use specification by example to break that user story down and make it more clear to all involved what we mean by it. So to give you an example, specification by example always uses the given, when, then structure, and that's a format for describing system behavior or tests. And in this case we have the given. A field service engineer is viewing the list of scheduled service locations. When he does that, what needs to happen? When he then takes an action, that's put into the when. A field service engineer clicks on one of the service locations. What should happen then is that a field service engineer will be able to see the service location on a map. So we have a precondition, a certain state. There we have an actor, in this case the field service engineer, that takes an action, clicks on the service locations, and we have an observable result, something that happens as a result of that. People experienced with testing will recognize that this is also the structure of a test case. So as you do this, and this is also something that you do as a team, sometimes involved with business, but as you do this with your stakeholders, then you will start refining your user stories by adding more and more specifications, and you will arrive at questions that you haven't thought of before. For example, what should happen when we select multiple locations, or the field service engineer selects multiple locations, or what type of map is actually being shown. So this is a way to make your user specifications, user stories more specified in a way that you can test them. What's also important to note about specification by example is that when you do it correctly, you have, at the same time, you will have specifications, you will have automatable acceptance test cases, and you will have living documentation of the functionality in your application. And this is also an important step towards test-driven development. So these are two agile tools that we recommend, and then you can Google on these tools and you'll find books and articles explaining them in more detail. This is an art in itself to use them, so they could actually have their own webinars. But there's a lot of info that you can find online if you want to apply these. The bottom line is that in our experience, it's very important to use agile practices when you introduce agile testing. Otherwise, you will jeopardize your speed and agility. So going now from a more overview of what you can do at the organizational level, moving towards your development team, and how you can actually start developing using ATS. We have the following steps to recommend to you, and that is first, define the main flow of your application. Well, if you have major impact map, it's very easy to identify this flow, because of course you will see where you can achieve the most impact or have the most risk. For this main flow, you then create a test script. You can do it using the recorder, as Edward has shown, or you can do it manually by specifying the test steps. And the next step is to duplicate this test script within ATS. So you will have a new instance of it in the ATS test script repository, and you can then modify this new instance to add steps. So to give an example, if you create a test script that executes an order flow in your application, you can duplicate it and, for example, make a variant where you order more products or different products. So in this step, you add new steps in your test cases, or you modify the test data being used. It's also the right moment to think about how to structure your test scripts. So what are logical points in your application to break the functionality down. What's a logical way to store the test scripts in your ATS repository, because in ATS you can use different folders to store your test cases. You want to do it in a way that you can easily find the test case belonging to a specific part of functionality as you change your application as it grows over time. When you've done that, of course, you execute the test scripts, and when you've done that initially, it's also a good point to think about which test scripts are valuable to schedule for automatic execution. In that way you achieve automated regression testing. And of course, again, here you can make use of your impact map to see where is my highest business risk or where is my highest business value, and execute those tests automatically, so you ensure that those parts of your application's functionality keep functioning as your application evolves. And then of course, after executing your test scripts, then you have to examine the result. So it's very important, and this is really a product owner responsibility, that the product owner verifies that the team fixes identified bugs that result of test case execution, and that fixes are being retested. And so a practical way to achieve this is to make successfully executed test scripts a part of your definition of done. So that's the steps we have, but we recommend you to start using ATS. We also have a recommendation on the different responsibilities in your team. Of course, testing is a team deliverable in a Scrum team, for example, but we have found that assigning responsibilities to the roles initially can increase your chances of success. So what we advise for the Scrum Master is to make this person responsible for registration of the projects in ATS, so that it's correctly related to the platform and that you are able to import your user stories into ATS. And also do the ATS account management, so make sure that everybody in the team that needs to have access can access ATS, and also any cloud provider that you may use to execute your test scripts, such as a browser stack, as Eduard was showing you earlier in the demo. Then for the product owner is responsible for defining a hierarchy for your test scripts, as I explained earlier, based on what's logical, considering the functionality in the application, and make sure that the team also adheres to what's being decided upon. Another very, very, very important responsibility of the product owner is to examine the test outcomes with business stakeholders. And this is, again, what we found is that if you do not involve the business in the test results, there is nobody feeling the pain when your software delivery is below par on quality, and yeah, there will just be usually will not be enough momentum to keep testing going, or at least have it deliver value for you. And the product owner should consider which test script should be scheduled for automatic execution. I explained that in the previous slide. Then the rest of the team. So we divided it in more junior team members and senior. I will explain why. So the junior team members, so basically all the team members, should define individual test scripts, and using the recorder or manually, in the way that Eduard described, and should execute those tests and of course evaluate the results and report back to the product owner. And then we said that the senior team member should do, of course, all those things, but also be responsible for creating the actions needed for custom widgets, because in the current version of the platform, the Mendix standard widgets are all supported, but not all custom widgets are automatically supported by the solution, and that means sometimes you need to build in support, which requires a little more knowledge, for example, on JavaScript. So this is typically an action that a more senior team member or in your team should do. So that's our recommendations, best practices, both on the organizational level and also on how to organize your team when you start using ATS. And I will now hand back to Eduard talking about the roadmap.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clyde. So as we are now getting already way through the webinar, let me just explain a little bit about the roadmap, in this case of ATS. So as you see it here, within the months of July and August, we really have been focusing on we're in a quite quick development speed and mode, where initially in July the focus was on the usability and also the recording of the test script, really taking that to the next level, and as we also have been able to demonstrate and to showcase that to you. Another one, and that was already delivered in the August release, is to be able to import and export test data. So really have your data to drive your test scripts. I have not shown that as in the demonstration right now, but you have the ability to define your own Excel sheets with all different kinds of data that you want to drive your test scripts. You can upload them into the system and then attach those as variables to your test scripts, and then use those to execute not your script. You just define your script once, attach the different variables that you want to use as input coming from the Excel files, and then based on the number of rows that you have defined in your Excel file, the X amount of test scripts will also automatically be fired. So just define once, create your script, and then have it done automatically, which will also really save you a lot of manual steps that you have to execute. Currently in the release, that's, well, yeah, it's almost finalized September, but we also deliver very much an improved dashboard and reporting functionality to show you how tested were executed, how successful they were, where are more or less the errors and the issues that you still need to focus on. So that's coming in the release. That is going to be delivered today, or in this case next week. And Clyde already touched upon the topic that when it comes down to custom widgets and custom widget actions. That also comes down to how does ATS exactly work. So the recording functionality of ATS means that all of the widgets that Mendix supports out of the box, so that are coming with the Mendix platform standard, are all enabled within the ATS application. So that means that the recorder is able to identify the different widgets that are being used within your application, and that's why that's more or less really the magic between the integration between Selenium and Mendix, where ATS is that layer that enables the identification of the elements that are being clicked and that are being selected. Now, that means that all of the widgets need to be enabled within ATS to make sure that it functions properly. But of course, you can also create your own custom widgets, and custom widgets out of the box need to be enabled to make sure that you can also attach those. So what you will see within the next weeks, a how-to will also be delivered on how you will be able to enable your own custom widgets to work together with ATS and also with the recording functionality. Now, and then what we will be focusing on for in September, where we will have ATS to be a fully public multi-tenant application. Which means that ATS will then be provided for you directly. Well, if you have the access to it, it will be provided to you from the context of the Mendix portal, and it will also very much allow that we are able to upgrade and to update as well the ATS application in a central way, so you will always be able to leverage the latest functionality of ATS there as well, if you're in this case are using it. So this is just a little bit of a glimpse on the ATS roadmap and what is there to come. And well, basically this finalizes our webinar, and Jan, I think it's time to take on some questions.
All right, thank you very much for the presentations. Let's talk about some of the questions. We've already received quite a lot of questions in the question window, so thank you very much for that. and we'll start going through them right now. The first question is by Kees Vogel, and he asks, what does ATS use for identifiers? Georg, perhaps that is a question that you can answer.
Yes. I think I can answer that quickly. ATS is making use of the MX name classes that Mendix has introduced for the purpose of automated testing. So when you work or when you design your application in the Mendix modeler, you can assign a name to every widget that you use on your pages, and that name is later transformed into a class name and put onto that element on the page. And well, that's what we use to identify the widgets that you see in your application.
All right, great, thank you very much. The next question is, can we parameterize the recorded or reusable function?
Yeah, I can. Oh, sorry. Oh well, Georg, yeah, please. Well, if you want to. Yeah, of course.
Yes, we haven't seen it in the demo, but well, you can of course create your own custom functions and use parameters like you would do in a microflow. So if you record something in a test case and you think it's a reusable path of let's say 5 or 10 actions, and then you can just extract them and create a custom action and use the parameters that you need to make that generic and reusable for other test cases.
All right, clear answer, thank you. The next question is, can we perform data-driven testing using ATS?
Shall I answer? Yeah, I think I already answered it while discussing the roadmap. So as mentioned in one of the previous releases, we have delivered the functionality where you have the option to upload your own data sets into the ATS application and then drive your test scripts leveraging that data. So yes, it is possible.
All right, thank you. Next question is, can we view recorded scripts in ATS? So can you see your scripts in the application test suite anywhere?
Yes, yeah, I can definitely answer that one. So I have not shown that in the demo, but of course all of the scripts that you record are then being centrally placed in your repository, and once they are there in your repository, you can then start to use them or to leverage them, or you can change them and manipulate them. Maybe you want to add steps, or you want to remove steps, or maybe you want to duplicate them, make them more dynamic, add parameters to it, and then once you have played around with it, they will be in your repository. You can use and leverage them to for instance, to generate, for also to support you during your regressions. So after every deployment, you can rerun all of your test scripts to see if your application is still working as it should.
All right, thank you. So the next question by Stuart Harrison is, what would occur if a test fails, and how would you see the reason for failure?
Yes, I can answer. What you will see within the user interface, so currently during the demo I showcased, of course, a test script that was already that was successful. But if it would, and there you get the green check mark. If it would fail, then the system would give you a red cross, basically showcasing that it failed. You can then drill down into the specific test script, into the result. It will show you exactly at which step the test script failed, and it will also give you a screenshot of the state of the application at the moment when the script failed, and it will also give you a detailed information on why it failed. And it could be that, for instance, and it really depends on the test that you perform. It can be that you want to validate if certain data was entered. It can also be that maybe the button that needs to be pushed does not exist anymore, and then you will get a detailed information of the step that says, well, I can't find this button anymore. So yeah, maybe you should have to look in your application there as well. Yep.
All right. Next question by Otto is ATS limited to only Mendix applications, or can we adjust parameters maybe within ATS so that we can use it for our own web applications?
Okay, yeah, I can definitely answer that one. So in ATS is specifically designed to work together with your Mendix applications. And that really is where the added value is, that out of the box we support the connections with, specifically with the widgets supported by Mendix. If you want to leverage other applications, it is, well, in theory, it is possible, but then you need to build your own integration or your own identification with the widgets that are leveraged within the other application. So, in theory, it can definitely be done, but it was not the purpose on why ATS was built. It's very much specifically built to help you and support you in testing your Mendix applications.
All right, thank you. The next question, also by Otto, is seeing that ATS indicates the set execution time, could one delay some inputs or actions to simulate real user experience and then run multiple scripts at the same time to simulate a performance test? So perhaps this one's a good question for Georg.
Yes, I can answer that. So basically the question is, can you use ATS for load testing? Yes, you can do that, but it's not the main purpose, so it's not really the focus of ATS. So the focus is on functional testing in ATS. Of course, you can use parallel tests in ATS to simulate a certain amount of users. But there's no specific functionality in ATS right now for a load testing, so something that a load testing tool would provide. So it's
all right.
well, it's yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the answer is clear. Rather than duplicating a part of the test script, can we make it into a reusable method and parameterize it so that we can use it wherever we need?
Yeah, I think actually the question has been answered already, so yes, you can do that. I think the question is always, do you need to reuse that in or do you know that you will still change these parts in a test case, then create a custom action so that you can maintain it later on, so that you don't have let's say redundant test steps in multiple test cases. But if you know that part of the application is never changing, then you can go the easy path and just copy it to a new test case.
All right, cool. Pete Borst asks the question, does ATS work with all Mendix versions? I think that's a good one for Georg.
Yeah. So it's not working on all Mendix versions, but it's working always on the latest Mendix version. So right now I think the latest Mendix version is 6.9, and we support applications from Mendix 5.14 upwards. So if the application is somewhere between 5.14 and 6.9, you're good to go. And we know every month there's a new Mendix release, at least one. So when there's a new Mendix release coming, then we will, in a very short time, it will be supported by ATS already.
Right, great, thank you very much. Is there a way for failed ATS scripts to automatically generate a bug in the Mendix support portal or in the Mendix portal? Do you know that, Georg?
It's yeah, it's that functionality like that is not available right now, but as we've seen on the roadmap, we are working on a multi-tenant version of ATS, and the idea of that multi-tenant version is not only to to make it easier for customers to get access to ATS, but also to further integrate it into the platform. And this specific functionality that you are asking for here is something that will be part of such a multi-tenant ATS version. So it will be integrated into the whole life cycle of the Mendix platform and the portal in many ways. So this is definitely something that will be possible then.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a good question by Daniela Field. How long does it take to implement ATS? Do we have any examples?
Is it a question for me?
Yeah, sure, if you want to answer this.
That?
Yeah, I can definitely also answer this question from their perspective. So normally what we do within an ATS, when there's also comes together with a services package, and together with the services package, what we will do is we will educate you. Of course, it will include a training on how to create the scripts, how to embed them, technically how it's also being connected and how it's being set up. So we will connect it to the applications that you also want to test. And then during the first few steps, we will guide you in creating your test script for your applications. So technically, it's not that much of difficult of implementing it. It really is about making sure that you can leverage the tool in the best and the most effective way for your tests. So, and then while we guide you through you creating your tests and your test scripts, we will then, within the next few weeks or sprints, we will regularly check in with you to see how things are going, and then evaluate as well and see if there's still some questions there to be answered. So yeah, we really have set up a process to guide you to as quickly as possible be able to get the most out of the tool.
Yeah, I can add to that also from experience that getting up and running with the tool is usually pretty quickly. I've seen customers do it in 4 hours, developers already creating test cases, executing them, looking at the results. So actually using the tool and start running your first test scripts goes very quickly. What usually requires a little more thought and a little more effort in an organization is to get the whole governance right. The stuff that I talked about in this webinar, mentality change that's sometimes needed to find the sweet spot between adding testing to your development efforts and not introducing so much burden that the testing becomes too slow, and while on the other hand adding the value that the business perceives also why you're doing this quality effort and that they appreciate it. So that's obviously something that takes some more time and needs attention. That's also something that we guide you in when you use the starters package.
Right, thank you very much. Nice elaborate answer. There's a question here by Martin Nelissen, and he asks, can ATS export the results, so pass or failed, of the tests to an external file, for example, XLS or CSV? I think Eduard will answer this question. Oh, sorry, I meant Georg will answer this one.
Yeah, I can answer that. So that's part of the ATS release of this month. So the September release has a new report where you can actually export the whole result of all your test cases into a PDF report.
Great.
So yes.
Yeah, it's nice, nice addition. Are there possibilities in ATS to speed up the execution time of a complete suite of tests by running them in parallel? I think it's a good one for Georg as well.
Yeah. Yes. So parallel testing is possible. It somehow depends on your Selenium provider that you've picked, how many parallel tests you are allowed to execute. So you can just configure that in ATS how many tests you want to parallelize, and then yeah, you can speed up your test execution doing that.
All right, great. What kind of license do you need for using ATS? I think Eduard will take this one.
Yeah, I can definitely answer that one. So ATS is licensed per application that you wanted to test, and And in the interval, you can buy it, of course, for multiple applications, and very quickly as well. The model is that you can leverage and deploy ATS for all of your applications. And in the end, if you buy for 3, or when you get more than 3 applications, you can actually just buy it actually for all of your applications. So from 3+ applications, it automatically becomes available for all the applications that you want to test.
All right, thank you. Let's see. We have a lot of questions, so I'm trying to filter some. How can you vary the test data? For example, how do I avoid entering duplicate data into the test system? I think Georg may answer this one.
Yes. The best practice to do something to avoid having redundant test data is that you generate some random data at runtime in your test case. So there's a function that you can use in your test case that gives you some random data. So every time you run a test case, it will give you a different data, and then you use that data as input in your test case. So you always create different data in the application.
All right, great.
So that's also important. One addition, it's also important for your test case, because at the end of your test case you need to verify whether your test was successful. So you don't want to verify the data from your previous test, but from that specific test run.
Good, thank you. John Connor asks, how do you specify which code version to hit in test? One for Georg, I think.
Yes. So you don't specify that in ATS. So what you specify in ATS is your deployment. So for example, you specify this is my acceptance cloud slot, and I want to test on this cloud slot, and then it's up to you which version of your application you deploy on that cloud slot.
All right. Let's do one more question. Let's see if we have, well, it's a lot of good questions around here. It's hard to pick out one because I'm literally getting, I've already have over 50 questions, so there's a lot of interest here. Will this be available for on-site installations? I think Eduard can go into that.
Yeah. I can definitely answer that one. So the ATS platform as it is only available as a cloud-based solution. So it really is running as well within the Mendix cloud. So that means that the applications that you want to test need to be accessible from the Mendix cloud. So if you run already your applications within the Mendix cloud itself, that's of course no problem. If you have your Mendix application running on site, it can all still be tested using ATS, but in most cases, of course, there you have them running on your internal network. So then we have to start a dialogue and a discussion together to see how we can make sure that ATS is able to access, or also your Selenium instance is able to access your applications on your internal network, which means that probably there's a firewall in between where we have to find the best way as well to work in there. So it is definitely possible. We just have to make sure that we find the best way how ATS is able to access your applications.
All right, thank you all very much. We still have a lot of questions unanswered, but don't worry, we're going to take this offline. We're going to go through all the questions and try to reach out to people and to answer these questions outside of this live webinar. So for now, thank you very much for joining the webinar. Don't forget to leave your feedback on the way out. Let us know what you thought of the webinar, the presentation, the topic, and please leave your suggestions for new topics and anything you want to tell us. So thank you for joining, and see you next time.